Ladies and gentlemen, there are many great injustices that are dealt with in any country. And there are tyrannies of majority and there are tyrannies of minority. And I believe that protest groups are a sign that the people care about the government. It is a sign that we are as a country believe in freedom of speech. We as a country believe in the results of peaceful protests. I define protest groups as more than two people that are not non-violent protesters. This includes strikes from workers as well as pickets of things that they do not believe in. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe the problem of this motion is that there has been polarizing views that divide the country due to these street protests that are being held. And I believe that regardless of that, I believe that we should be celebrating it, and I will tell you why later. So, I believe that my stance on this motion would be that we celebrate the freedom of speech as well as celebrate this position of privilege that we have as a country, as the people of this country, that we have over the other countries that are tyrannical as well as dictatorships. In my first point, I will talk about the benefits of freedom of speech as well as celebrating it, and we would like to contend that yes, that protest groups can be annoying, but when they're done peacefully, they give representation as representation of part of the population, whether or not their ideals agree with yours or not. I believe that the benefit. So yes.
Sir, why does the emergence of ideologies in status quo wouldn't be part of a freedom of speech?
I believe that regardless that despite them being a product of disenfranchisement, that them taking to the streets and protesting, that this is their representation and this represents their involvement, their will of involvement into the country's politics. I believe regardless of whether or not you believe that the people, that even if it's a small minority that feel disenfranchised by the sitting government, that they should be represented by protests or otherwise. I believe there are many ways I do understand there are many ways for people to elect government officials, but however, they believe that by protesting, by showing the politicians that their ideologies, that these politicians would listen to them and pander to them and give them a voice and give them the rights they want and deserve. I'd like to talk about how celebrating this position of privilege actually benefits both the country nationally as well as internationally. Ladies and gentlemen, so I would like to yes.
Do you celebrate the more protest groups popping out in Malaysia that incite hate speeches against non-Malays in Malaysia?
Yes. I like to point out that the debate motion is that we celebrate the existence of protest groups regardless of their ideology. But of course, but if I were to address that, I would say that yes, there is people who believe in outright ideologies, that believe that some people are less deserving of rights than they do, and that is legitimate, and that we should be listening to them, irregardless of whether or not we believe they are wrong or not. So when we ignore a more silent minority or silent majority, that we say that their views do not matter, and when we say that we jeopardize the value of democracy, both to us in an international level as well as a national level. I believe in my second point, I would like to talk about the benefits of celebrating the existence of a protest group as well as celebrating the freedom of speech that we the people are given.
So
That's benefits of celebrating the country's the benefits of celebrating freedom of speech. Not only allows us for a country to move forward with any ideals the people have, as well as giving a voice internationally by showcasing the abilities and the achievements that people can bring. A protest group can stand as a vanguard. They stand as one, as well as a voice to the people. That they not only show not only to us as the government, they show to both our government as well as other governments that we, the people, have the power to make a difference.
So
not simply true elections, by knowing, but also knowing and giving politicians by telling the politicians what we want. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to point out that there is a silent majority within our country today, as my third point, that we believe that there is severe bias not only in Malaysia, but also in America, where we believe that the Electoral College has falsely elected their leaders. However, despite this, we protest. We tell them that we would like an independent commission of drawing electoral ranges. However, we encourage them to speak, giving them representation, giving them a part of the population, regardless of their ideology, a representation of faith and the faith in the democracy, and also giving them representation so that they can maintain their faith in a democratic process. And with that, there are many ways that we can help not only our country in advancing our ideals. There are many ways that we can expand upon this, but with that, I would like to let this motion stand. Thank you.
And Prime Minister, I invite the leader of
video later.
So the second button.
Yeah.
Understand that protest groups are an avenue for a change, that avenue for people to oppose the status quo, to oppose in what they believe in. And hence, protest groups need numbers to exist, and they need numbers to garner lobbying, they need numbers to garner funding, they need numbers to garner support, they need numbers to garner a lot of media exposure and things like that. Protest groups function on these kind of things. The problem starts when you have too many protest groups that has so many little bit of nuances between each other, or even ideologies that incite hatred, hate speech, ideologies that harm the country, ideologies that are not progressive, ideologies that are not screened or filtered before even saying it out loud. This is what happens when you just allow freedom of speech to be value neutral just like that. And my speech will then focus on rebuttals first before my arguments. But first, we would like to, as OO, we would like to first say our stance that we are okay with lesser protest groups, as long as their ideologies are inclusive and are progressive with the country's needs. What do we mean by this? We mean that protest groups will fight for feminism rights, or fight for labor rights, or fight against a clean government. It's something that we are okay with, and protest groups are essentially very good. The problem is when you have something that opposes, that has little bit of nuances with these kind of groups, and that you create a lot more confusion between the people about as to how these protest groups actually function, or how you're going to dilute the message of the original protest group that you want to currently believe in. So what do we say? Why protest groups need to be progressive? When voicing out against the status quo, you need a lot of people to support you in a democracy like Malaysia. When Malaysia understands that we function on democracy, we need majority numbers and majority people speaking out against something. Hence, what we need here is critical mass and a lot of people that are inclusive within the protest group. Indians, Kanazans, Chinese people have to be included with the majority when they oppose something itself. Hence, we have to analyze that. How does the community in Malaysia exist? We understand that it's a privilege ethnicity of people within status quo. Hence, these people will always have the avenues to voice out and will always have something to oppose against, because not only because of their background, but because of their education, but because of the constitutional rights. These are what they are inherently born with and what they can then utilize to voice out against. We also have to understand that people who protest are from urban places, like the mid-income, like the low-income, and also the people from the rural areas. We're talking about these people who are easily brainwashed to believe in something that is not politically progressive, but only go in for it for the personal benefit. For example, let's not name any things here, but there are some protest groups who garner support from these rural area people just because they have lack of information or they have lack of knowledge about what is actually happening on the ground. Hence, when opening government said that freedom of speech is representation, we understand that, and we say that in our side we also have freedom of speech and representation. But his point is value neutral because it happens on both sides. We just want to let you know that the nuances between these protest groups are very, very minute, and that when you have more minute nuances, you're going to confuse so many people, and eventually you're going to disregard and dilute the point of having a protest group. Hence, when he said the position of privilege, that we have to use our avenues to voice out. Yes, we understand that you want to voice out against something that opposes you, and maybe a protest group doesn't exactly include you in this stance. But in a protest group, you can always function as an expanding and a progressive thing, because what you can do is you already have a critical mass or a market for you to exist and to voice out your opinion. For example, a labor rights group who want to argue for maternity rights, you have to go through a labor union, and through the labor union, you can voice out that we have the right for maternity leaves that are paid. Hence, with that, you can garner the critical mass to argue for your cause instead of just creating a new one, and people will be so confused as to you're fighting for maternity rights, but this is under the section of labor rights and things like that. You are going to dilute the original message and the original cause and the original stance and objectives of the current avenue that you have. You're not going to utilize your avenue to the fullest. And when he talks about how listen to them regardless of whether they are right or not, we have to listen. I understand that this is democracy, that everyone matters. The problem is that when groups get the avenue to incite hate speech and to incite hatred within the community, to dilute the unity between people, it's going to harm us a lot more comparatively to a bigger protest group, and for something that already represents and has a critical mass for you to voice out what you believe in. Yes.
Look, if you're saying that you're okay with people's majorities and you need critical mass, then what's wrong if these critical mass brings some sort of negative messages?
The thing with these negative messages is that we allow you to do that. These negative messages is going to eventually dilute people from what the progression actually means. When protest groups voice out against status quo, we understand that there is a very privileged majority within Malaysia that exists. Hence, the argument that they come from and the stance that they come from might not exactly be of transparency or be of acknowledging their privilege. Hence, these blind groups will then lead people into the wrong direction as to how Malaysia is supposed to progress. Hence, that's why when they create more political groups that are not of progression and not of inclusiveness, it's going to create more dissent between the people. Hence, when we talk about how a myriad of protest groups dilutes the original political message, as we can see, the Bersih 2.0 was supposed to be about clean elections and fighting for minority rights. But then you have things popping up like the red shirts and the orange shirts, something protesting against each other. It's going to create a lot of confusion between the people when they are fighting for a cause that they actually believe in or actually want to participate in. How? When you are born as a privileged majority within Malaysia, you are actually supposed to support this political group, this protest group, but you stand for something else other than this than this political group. Hence, it's going to confuse you as a lowest common denominator as to, do I represent my identity or do I represent my ideologies? So, hence, in these certain things, the progressiveness of the protest group is very, very important in Malaysia to be able to enhance and understand each other and to promote tolerance. Instead of fighting against something that you confuse yourself between, that the nuances between them is going to be very confusing for myself, who I am born of privilege or lack of privilege, is still the same thing. That these political groups, that these protest groups need to be something that has united and inclusive, and it promotes these protest groups to be more inclusive towards minorities or progressive, for fighting for progressiveness within their own communities as well. Hence, therefore, lesser protest groups but with more critical mass should be allowed within status quo. Thank you. My leader of opposition invite Deputy Prime Minister. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, our stance today is how that we celebrate the existence of the protest groups in Malaysia. These protest groups do not necessarily have to not abide by the law to exist, right? On the ground level, Black Lives Matter members were still prosecuted for committing crimes. They were still prosecuted for vandalism. Bursa members who overthrew cars were also still prosecuted. So we still argue that the law will still apply to protest groups who take it beyond their ideology. And firstly, I would like to engage with a few points from opposition. She mentioned that we have to screen the ideas and that they have to be constantly progressive ideas. And although the nuances are very minute, we argue that intersectional feminism also has very minute differences, and they fall into different categories, and they also dilute status quo. So innate culture based in Malaysia is also one of the primary factors that encourage these protest groups to even appear. So we first want to state what a problem with status quo is. The problem is that polarizing groups are dividing the country, and these people have polarizing views. But in order to eliminate these groups, we need to understand the nature of why a protest group forms in the first place. They are a product of disenfranchisement from the community, and this product or this disenfranchisement itself allows them to this formation of protest groups actually allows this disenfranchisement to be eliminated from the systems. So we also want to celebrate our freedom of assembly. After Bursa 3, the Peaceful Assembly Act was drawn in 2012, and this allows for protest groups to actually come up and state what affirmative action really inspires the real call to action, rather than a watered down message from identity politics. Right? We want to maintain the realism, the shared experiences that these oppressed minorities and communities face in their daily lives, but they are not given the opportunity to voice out their opinion. And that is why when you do not allow this, when you do not allow freedom of speech, when you do not allow freedom of assembly as constitutionally written, by the way, that you are actually drowning out voices that need to be heard, drowning out voices that are disenfranchised, and it actually, to enable the protest groups to become up and coming, it will actually stimulate interest in more people to come up and actually encourage formal discussion and discourse. We contend with the fact that these protest groups can be a little bit irritating at first, but on the ground level, they are only irritating and they turn violent if what they want to achieve is not achieved. So in order to achieve these progressive views and natures, the law will still have to apply. And as these people protest, as we protest as a nation, we are actually gaining traction for these people to speak out, and we are giving them a part of the population a platform of which they did not have before, to constantly
bring down outright discrimination and racism that exists in the systemic oppression that is in society. Yes, I'll take one.
We are not against freedom of assembly, but rather we are telling you that you are disregarding avenues that already exist to voice out what is harmful. Please engage on that.
Okay. In order to accept a particular view, you need to first hear them out. And in order to hear them out, voices that are already drowned out in society, social media probably is not the only avenue to achieve this, right? And regardless of ideology, minorities are being oppressed. And according to the human rights movement, I mean the Human Rights Declaration, right? Article 21 states that everyone has the right to take part in the governance of his country, directly or indirectly through. No, thank you. So everyone has the right of freedom of peaceful assembly and association. Regardless of what association this is, this does not mean that the law does not apply to them. The law will still apply to them should they choose to violate the law, to turn violent, to go perform on things that are breaking the law. So we will bring up the idea that it came out from opposition about how the Bersih and Red Shirts rally, or how they are actually conflicting between identity and ideology. We will tell you that Bersih is a manner of identity because we wanted clean and fair elections. But the Red Shirt rallies the Bersih is a matter of ideology, whereas Red Shirt rallies are a matter of identity politics. So we want to eliminate this identity politics, but we want to celebrate the existence that they can actually come out and voice out their opinions without channeling them through improper discourse. So if it is not meaningful, the magnitude of their anger is shut down, and this is when protest groups turn violent, right? We tell you that it is a self-reflection of their struggles, that they are continuing to exist in the systemic discrimination that they face, and because of this, they are entitled to their anger. And once certain things like this happen, it will help enable them to self-actualize their problems and inspire a real call to action. Okay, now I want to go back on what we have talked about today. First, we tell you that from a position of privilege, it is unfair to contend that groups cannot be formulated simply because you find them irritating. And we also want to reclaim back the systems of institutionalized discrimination by actively calling out members and celebrating their identity without disenfranchising them even more by shutting down their voices. And outright discrimination will also continue to exist as long as they do not hold water. Okay, we beg to propose. Thank you.
Executive Branch decided by yang over here.
The thing crashed.
I think it's fine now. You don't want to be filmed, right?
Yeah, cause
Yeah, it is fine. You sure it's not filming?
I don't know.
Maybe just put
Just put it down.
Yeah.